Cool. We're on. Welcome to the Athletes Health Podcast here, talking to coaches, athletes, leaders, anyone we can learn some tips, tricks, tools from, add to our tool bag, especially around this mental performance game, just performance in general, which is why we're doing this. And today I got a pretty cool coach down from IMG, Coach Brian Walker. Coach, you want to introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll just kind of start talking here?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, appreciate you having me on. I'm Brian Walker. I'm the assistant head of strength and conditioning here at IMG Academy. Also the head of strength and conditioning for IMG Academy baseball. Yeah, man. Coach kind of started off in baseball. So that's kind of how I got my passion in this thing. But yeah, I mean, I was born and raised in South Florida, so it's kind of a hotbed for baseball. And I would say that against all the people on here that potentially are from California. Yeah, started off in baseball. From there, kind of worked my way through high school, through college. Was fortunate to play college baseball at Division I level and also at the Division II level. And I would say I probably wasn't biggest or the strongest or anything like that. For me, strength and conditioning was kind of a big part of my career, even though we didn't really have like a strength and conditioning coach at the colleges I was at. But
Really?
usually in the off season, I would get with some of my buddies who were doing maybe some off season programs and all that. So I kind of hopped in on that. But worked my way through college, had the opportunity to play independent ball for a couple years. When I went through college, I actually started off in sports medicine. My mom was a nurse and I played sports. So I just kind of put the two together and figured that would be the route that I would go. Things change in the sense of, I think in athletic training, you get like an approval period. So it's about 2 years. So like I said, I play independent ball for 2 years. So that approval period expired for me. So that's kind of pushed me into kind of going a different route. And, I had a buddy of mine that worked in the private sector who took me under his wing. I ended up interning for him for about like 6 months and then eventually got a full-time job as a sports performance coach in the private sector. From there, we were contracted by a Division II school down in Florida, Lynn University in Boca Raton. And that's kind of where I fell in love with team sports. Kind of took the leap of faith after that and quit my full-time job and took a paid internship at Louisiana Tech University where I was fortunate to work for Kurt Hester over there. And during my time there, I helped out with football and oversaw baseball, softball. That was the year that COVID happened and quarantine shut down our season halfway through. During quarantine, through connections that Coach Hester had, found my way over to University of Georgia, where I was primary assistant with men's basketball, baseball, and then oversaw tennis, equestrian, diving.
So like the
And then,
Olympic sports kind of?
and then
Yeah.
pretty much helped out with all the Olympic sports. So while I was there, I was fortunate enough to move into a graduate assistant role and get my master's there. So go dogs all day. But yeah, from there, once I finished up my time there, I got a job with the Cleveland Guardians organization, Cleveland Indians, if people aren't familiar with the name change or anything like that.
Yeah.
I was there for a year. And then after a year, had the opportunity to come here to IMG Academy, which allowed me to come back home to Florida and kind of the rest is unwritten or rest is written. I've been here going on to my second year here and hopefully building something really special.
And now too, you're like, did I see this right? That you're the like assistant head coach for the strength and conditioning overall,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
you do the baseball stuff.
yeah. We kind of have like a tier system where we have a head of strength and conditioning, and then we have assistant heads of strength and conditioning, senior S and C coaches, and then assistant strength and conditioning coaches. So it's kind of crazy, especially not many people know that we have like 23 people on staff here. So kind of a lot of different philosophies and all that. I think it's awesome though, because everybody has a different perspective. So you kind of learn something new every day while you're in the building.
Mm-hmm. No, that is a good point that you learn something every day with all those different viewpoints of how, and that probably helps the kids out too. I feel like just
Yeah.
them seeing it all. Um, so as you were saying that, one thing that stood out to me, which I think would maybe caveat to your whole progression and everything, and even where you're at now, was that you were saying that you weren't always like the strongest or the like you weren't the very most athletically gifted just for size and capability. So when and you guys didn't have a strength and conditioning program. That's
Yeah,
crazy. So,
no. So
so
we
you,
didn't.
I was just gonna say, so you really took the initiative and really kind of said, how can I get to where I want to get?
Yeah. So with that, it was kind of cool, like in a sense of, I guess I always had the mantra. I kind of take some of the stuff from my athletic career and I kind of put that into like my coaching. I'm
Mhm.
really big on like just find a way. Like it's easy to make an excuse where it's like, hey, I didn't have a strength and conditioning coach and all that stuff, but one thing I was like, all right, I gotta find a way. Like I gotta find a way to get better because no one's gonna feel bad for me, right? So while I was when I was saying I would play Division 1, I played at Florida Gulf Coast University. We had a strength coach, but at the time it was like one strength coach for like or two strength coaches for all of Olympic sports. So
Yeah.
that wasn't nowadays you start seeing there's so many directors of baseball strength and conditioning to where like that is one dedicated strength coach for the baseball program. So that coach was really pulled in a bunch of different directions. So I think I want to say while I was there, pretty much we would go to LA Fitness at 6 a.m. and pretty much the coaches were like, "All right, we have an hour, have at it." Like no direction, no program, none of that stuff. So kind of had to figure out. And then when I went to a Division 2, obviously Division 1 didn't have a bunch of strength coaches at the time. But once I went to Division 2, it was more of like they had the rec center, but not like a athlete specific, like Olympic sports or anything like that. So I remember at the time, I really got really tight with the director of the rec center, and he was very much like helped me out, like kind of gave me some direction, but nothing like now that I look back, nothing like sports specific, just super general. But yeah, being from South Florida, I was fortunate enough to have a lot of buddies that, were playing professional baseball. So like during my fall time was their off season. So then
Mhm.
whenever I got like Thanksgiving break or Christmas break, I always made it a point to go back home and kind of get on their schedule. So they would wake up, grab breakfast and all that, go to the gym, do a speed session, do a lift session, all that stuff. So that's where I really got the foundation of like, athletic development. So that's where it's like I tried to take advantage of those times, and then when I went back, I would kind of build off of it. So I would kind of like if I knew that we did something for 4 weeks, this is how I progress it, and that's not knowing that that was laying the foundation of my career now. But yeah, it was tough. I mean, the only time I really had coaches' eyes on me was during those times when I went back home, and then just kind of had to figure it out when I went back to school to try to build off of what I learned over those breaks.
All right, that's perfect because you were finding the way, which
Yeah.
I think that'll be a key message through this. Yeah,
Mhm.
because as you were saying your progression here, and that's another thing that stood out was you didn't always have. I just know a lot of buddies or people who like they're in the sports world and then they're like, I want to do the strength and conditioning, but you didn't always fully think that that was your pathway that you're going to get into, is what it
Yeah,
sounds like.
no, no. So, like I said, like I grew up, my mom was a nurse, and then I was in sports. So, like I said, I just put two together and found a track where it was like sports medicine. So, like I said, I wanted to either be an athletic trainer or a physical therapist. So, that's where I got my degree. I got my bachelor's of science with a concentration in sports medicine, which has served me well now. But
Hmm.
yeah, that's what I wanted to do. And I mean, everything happens for a reason. Like I said, I never planned to play professionally 2 years after I finished my collegiate career. And I didn't put two and two together that I needed to take my board certification within those 2 years. So when I went back, like it very much, I went to a private school. So obviously while I was there, I was on athletic scholarship. So I never had to really worry about finances. So when I went back, obviously I didn't play there. So in order to get re-approved for the test, I would have had to go back to school, which probably would have put me in some student debt. So again, made the decision. I was like, well, I don't want to do that. Like, I come from a single family home with my mom. I didn't want to put that financial like burden on her. So I just kind of was like, all right, well, I got to figure out a way to like do something else that can still not take me off track while I can still use what I learned in the 4 years and apply it to my next career. So again, I was super fortunate to have a guy by the name of TJ Kanoki, very known. He was a kid I went to school with, took me under his wing, like call him like a big brother mentor. For sure. But yeah, he was very much the same way. He did athletic training in school, but then kind of switched to sports performance. So I was like,
Okay.
no better person to kind of learn from. So he's the one that I actually interned for 6 months. And I can honestly say I wouldn't be where I'm at if it wasn't for him. And so once he kind of showed me the rope of like, hey, like I know you learned this in school because I learned it too, and this is how I applied it to sports performance to help. So a lot of like what he does is not only like get you bigger, faster, stronger, but then also has the lens of how important recovery, prehab, rehab, all that stuff, and tries to blend it together to almost make like a holistic program from a sport development standpoint. So yeah, it was again didn't have any direction, but I would say it was probably him that was super influential to kind of guide me into the next path that I had when it comes to strength and conditioning for sure.
Cool, because I didn't know exactly how that stemmed together.
Yeah,
And it's really cool to hear you say that you're seeing, because I see this more now that the coaches usually have more to bring to the table than just like the general, like in this category of strength and conditioning. They're bringing supplemental additions to what they can bring to the table. And I think that
for
just
sure.
makes the whole field level up more too, because you have to
No
work on your
doubt.
game
No
and
doubt.
make it better.
No doubt.
Um, so, and through this story, and then as you're going from internship to internship, I can just see that you're leveling up. You're getting better on not who you're coaching, but you're having the bigger roles. Like you're going to collegiate, and then well, you're going where you were to then Georgia to then the Indians, and like you keep stepping up and hopping around. And you're back to baseball though too. Was
Yeah.
that always a plan as you were doing this, or was it like
Yeah.
what comes my way comes my way?
Yeah, so it's kind of hard. Like I'd probably say my time at Georgia was definitely helpful because it kind of opened my eyes. Like I said, one of my teams that I had was equestrian, so that's horseback riding for anybody that doesn't know. So people usually ask like, how'd you go about training equestrian? And it was like it was a fun little challenge because I always made a joke during recruiting visits with some of my girls is that when parents come, I was like, honestly, like if we really want to make this team better, like I need to train the horses rather than the ladies, just because they're the ones doing the work during the competition. So, yeah, I think at Georgia because baseball's always kind of been in it. Like even when I was in the private sector, I kind of started like at minor league, major league, like off season program, just because of the connections I had throughout my playing career. So there were some agents that I knew that I kind of played against and all that stuff. So they sent me their players and all that stuff. So I had that. And then obviously when I went to Louisiana Tech, I had baseball, softball, and football. But then when I went to Georgia, I helped primarily with basketball and baseball, and then helped out with all the other sports. So I think having that experience of all the other sports and the demands of the sports and trying to figure out how to best help those athletes for their specific needs in their sports was super helpful. But yeah, baseball's always been in the cards, and it's always something I had a passion for, just because it was super easy to kind of relate with coaches and talk to coaches and stuff because I knew the lingo, right? So
Mm,
I knew how the game flew. I knew um, some of the stuff that like the demands of the sports. Obviously, when I went to the Indians, like I'll put it up against anybody. It's one of the best development organizations in Major League Baseball, just because they get down to the nitty gritty and such in the details, like big on biomechanics, movement quality, all that stuff. So they do there's a lot of things that's important to them, and they take the time to measure it, evaluate it, assess it, and then kind of make some changes from there. But yeah, baseball's always been in the cards, and it's always been fun. So I'm fortunate. I wouldn't say that if somebody were starting out in strength and conditioning, that's always going to be the case. It's very much like start super broad, be super open minded. Because like I said, I had three sports that I probably wouldn't pick now to this day at Georgia, but I learned so much from it, and then eventually that's kind of helped me think outside the box and keep an open mind to focus mainly on baseball moving forward.
the the equestrian piece is pretty funny.
Yeah,
You would not think
yeah.
about doing that, and
Nah,
the horse
man.
piece.
Yeah,
And
and it's I would probably say shout out to Equestrian. They were the ones that gave me my first national championship. So my first year, yeah, we won the
good.
national championship. So I got a nice little ring from that and got honored during the halftime of a football game. So yeah, I always got
Dang.
love for them for sure. Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty sick. And I know the baseball stuff too, just because at some conferences I've been at, there's been some baseball strength and conditioning coaches, and some of the nitty gritty that they've gone into was pretty crazy, even to think about, just of all the biomechanical things of what with it and whatnot. So I
For
mean, I
sure.
give props to that. And but as you're saying this, the one thing that I'm really wondering is, as you're starting to jump from team to team, or you're just working with way more athletes, what are you kind of gaining through the experience from jumping from your career of sports to now actually coaching everyone else in the strength and conditioning world? Because as you're going from college to college, and obviously now too, you just working with more and more people, and I know you can learn a lot through that.
Yeah, I would probably say one word that comes to mind is perspective, right? Because if you think about it, like starting the private sector, it's like I have a wide array of like people. So I had athletes, I had youth athletes. I think my oldest client at one point was 79 years old. And I had soccer moms and all that stuff. Obviously going to Louisiana Tech, like it was a mid-major, so it's not one of your big schools. So like now you're getting the perspective of those guys that didn't exactly like aren't your top tier athletes, but they just have. I mean, shout out to my Louisiana Tech baseball guys. Like those guys are some dogs. It's almost like they
Hmm.
had that chip on their shoulder of like, all right, cool. Like they talk about like SEC baseball is the best baseball conference, which again, being in that conference, like I would say it is, but those guys had that chip of like, hey, your guys got to go up against our guys, and we're gonna give you a dogfight. Like, don't think we're gonna lay down just because of the name of the school. So that was fun. And then obviously going to Georgia, those are usually your top tier guys in that conference and all that stuff. So having that perspective of like what that looks like, because some of those guys, went first round or top 5 rounds. Obviously these are the top guys when it from pitching his velo in the country and all that stuff. And then going to the Indians Guardians organization, it's like very developmental heavy. But then again, you got to think it's like when you're in pro ball, when you bring
Yeah,
in a class, it is the top guys from all around the country. So
yeah,
it's like you'll have a few, like at Georgia, it's like we had a few, some guys that were top. And then you go to pro baseball and it's like the top guys from everywhere and from around the country. And then now being in the high school realm, it's like you have a few of the top guys in the country from a high school standpoint, but then you do have like a wide spectrum of other athletes that like, obviously with IMG, people come here because they want to give themselves the best chance to play at the next level. So you'll have some of your super elite kids, and then you'll have some of your kids that are like very on the other side of the spectrum of their development, and it's just trying to get them along and all that. I think right now the perspective that I take, some personal goals that I have here at IMG is that I've been at the mid-major level, I've been at the Division 1 level of the highest Division 1 level, and I've been at the professional level. I don't want to use that as a, hey, look at me, this is what I've done. I just want to use that experience of like, hey, this is what it takes to get to the next level when it comes to how you go about your business, your character, how you treat people, how your recovery is, how your training is, all that stuff. Like, this is what the elite of the elite do at the next level, whether it's college or professional. So trying to provide that information and pass on that education and give them that perspective. So that's why it kind of stuck in my head. I feel like was the biggest thing going from level to level and throughout this experience that I've had so far.
all right, so you're really taking the perspective from each spot, and really like how you're saying how you can find like different character traits or the different people at each level, which makes sense. But
Yeah,
you're really distilling it together and presenting it to the IMG athletes
no
at
doubt.
different times, different frame points, but of what it takes to do
No
whatever
doubt.
they're trying to do.
No doubt. No doubt.
I like that, because that's what I was going to ask you with the different levels. And I would just say it's almost like, well, I want to ask you about it. Is it like different mentalities that you're seeing throughout the different levels, or is it just their skill set? What do you kind of see separates all that, or how do you proceed it to the kids that you're coaching?
Honestly, it's probably a bad answer, but I would say both. honestly, because obviously you do see a different skill set, but
Yeah.
you have like you get different type of athletes. You might have guys that are like super highly skilled, but not very like critically thinking. And then you got the ones that are super critically thinking of like down to a minute of like what their routines are, but they're not maybe as highly skilled as the other ones. So like that's where it's been kind of cool in the sense of like um all right, like you have some of these kids that have all these attributes and all that stuff, but just because you might not have the same attributes doesn't mean you can't get to the same level as them. So I'm very much I harp on the aspect of like again, going back to my time, it's like find a way. Like again, I would say when I was playing, some of the kids that I have now, I didn't nearly have the attributes that they did, but I try to find a way. So I guess an example would be like if I knew that I didn't have the juice to hit a ball over the fence, well, maybe I can figure out a way that when I get on base, like how do I get that extra 90 feet? How do I get that other 90 feet? How do I put myself in a position to set my team up to, be successful. So it was like, I think it was funny. It was like my senior year, between my junior and senior year, like I knew that like I increased my average over 100 points, but then I went from like 4 stolen bases to 30 stolen bases. And that was mainly because it was like, I knew I couldn't hit the long ball, but I don't know. It's kind of a lost art nowadays where it was like, I dropped the bunt when the infield was back. I tried to shoot the holes when the infield was in. And then when I got on base, I was very in tune with like, all right, what's the time of the pitcher from him delivering the home and how I can get to second, how I can get to third or anything like that. So again, you have these kids nowadays that they're in the box and they're hitting balls like 400 feet in high school, right? So I was like, I wasn't that guy, but then it was like, all right, what is another attribute that I could be super elite in and do that? So yeah, man, I think the biggest thing is just give like honing in on the mentality that like stay on your path. Everybody's path is different, right? Like not everybody's path and journey is the same. I learned that in strength and conditioning when talking to coaches who's helped me in my career, that everybody's experience is different. Like the coaches that are at the super elite level, how they got there is super different than what I did. My track is not normal by any means. Like I think people would probably, call me crazy for having a full-time job, quitting it to take a paid internship. Like that doesn't make any sense, but like yeah, everybody's path is different. So I try to tell people like don't look at the next person. Like what can you do in this moment each day to make the most of your opportunity in order to set yourself up for the next day to you closer that much closer each day to your ultimate goal, whatever that is.
That's really good because that's one thing I was going to talk to you about is
Yeah.
just the whole modality of strength and conditioning. That's why I like talking to
Yeah.
strength and conditioning coaches
Yeah. Yeah.
because I mean with other coaches too, right? I mean, studying the game and everything else they're doing, it's a whole nother ball game. But with strength and conditioning, it's like you're trying to get to this number for reps, or you're trying to get to this
Yeah.
range of motion. Like, there's so many different nuances to it, but it is kind of like
Right.
what way can you get to it? And we'll touch on that. But I wanted to clarify fast. Were you saying that the athletes at IMG, or were you saying like as you've gained the perspective that some of them have that uh, really skill set, but then they maybe don't schedule out as much, or maybe some of them schedule it to a T, but they don't have that elite skill set.
Hey, thanks again for tuning into the Athlete's Health podcast. Your support really does mean a lot. We are passionate about bringing the mental health and performance topics to the forefront because, let's be real, the mental health crisis is a huge issue in society. Now, if you're enjoying the show, it would mean the world to us if you could just give it a 5-star review and share it with anyone who might benefit this message. Every bit helps in spreading the word and creating a stronger, healthier community. This podcast is just a small part of what we are doing at the Athlete's Health. We work directly with teams, coaches, and individual athletes even to help them unlock their full mental performance and ultimately overall performance. Now, whether that's getting the competitive edge, breaking through mental blocks, or just leveling up in the mental gym, we're trying to cover it all with people. So thank you for listening and supporting our mission. Now let's get right back to the show.
Yeah, I would
Bring
say
back
I would say that's definitely across like my whole time, whether that was
everything.
like Louisiana Tech, Georgia,
Cool.
the Cleveland Indians Guardians organization, and then even here, like it's kind of crazy to see that it's not, again, like it's not just like super skill based. Another example I can give is like, I can have a kid that throws 97 to 100 miles an hour, and then I have another kid that throws 88 to 90, right? So maybe that one kid is like, all right, cool. He has the skill, but maybe he's not locating and all that stuff. But an organization is still going to take a chance on him because he throws
Yeah.
97 to 100 miles an hour, right? So then his process of trying to figure that out is maybe not as dialed in as a kid that's 88 to 90, because you got to think nowadays 88 to 90 is slow, which is crazy to think now. So then an organization's like, we don't know, but this kid is super elite at filling up the zone, hitting his spots, throwing 3 to 4 pitches for strikes or anything like that. And then you just see how that kid goes about, the routine, how they prep for bullpens, how they go about that. Like everything is super meticulous. So again, it's very much like they're so different. There's so many spectrum. I guess that's a beautiful thing about baseball is that like you ain't got to be the biggest, you ain't got to be the
No.
strongest, you could be the shortest or anything like that. And you can find a way to get to, the top of that mountain, which I think is super cool. But yeah, definitely like the whole spectrum of athletes as I went through my career, it's like seeing a whole bunch of like athletes figure out their way of getting to their ultimate goal has been like super cool and super, super special.
Dude, that's good to hear. Because
Yeah.
I've had a few baseball conversations recently, and that just brings up thus the point of exactly what we're talking about. Where like it doesn't fully matter your exact numbers, how you're saying. I knew some people who they were pitching like 88 to 90, but they
Yeah.
got picked up because they could throw the darts, and they
Yeah.
knowing their character, they were doing like everything that they need to do and make it
For
happen.
sure. For sure.
And even just like in the baseball to like close it out, another person I was talking about is like, yeah, my kid's not like big or anything, but he can just step up to the plate and close it out every game, and that's what they saw in him. So like,
Yeah.
it's like that makes a good point
That's awesome.
as for everything we're saying.
No doubt.
And I really like how you're saying that it can be a different journey too for everyone, because that is like pretty good motivation too if you're ever thinking like, oh, this path is not working out, or like it's not figuring out. That I think you're not even the first person to say that. Was that
Yeah.
I mean I heard from that that journey will be different no matter what the timeline is, but you just got to
Yeah.
keep going with it.
No
Is
doubt.
that
No doubt.
what do you usually preach to like the kids while they're doing strength and conditioning? Because that's what I say. Because I know like on the field or on the court or anything, you can do sprints and stuff, and it stinks.
Yeah.
But sometimes in the weight room, that's when like you're going against the wall, like you are pushing it. And I know sometimes
Yeah.
that can get kind of hard. But are the kids you're working with, the athletes, they're just super motivated to do it? There has to be some days that like it's we're like, oh, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. I'll be honest. It's like, it's not rainbows and sunshine every day. Like some of these kids, like, especially this year with some of the training that we're doing, um, it's the first time that like some of these guys have really like got after it, right? So you do have the ones that are super motivated, but then you do have the ones that are like, oh man, I have to do this or anything. Cause like I always tell the guys, like, I get it. Like baseball is something, baseball is something that you love to do and all that stuff. But one message that I preach to answer your question is like you need to enjoy the process, right? So like baseball is only a small part of the process, right? Because obviously that's what you're training for, that's what you're trying to get better in. But like part of the process is like your training, your recovery, your sleep, your nutrition, like how you go about your business, like what are you doing? What are you doing on the weekends to? Oh, sorry, give me one second.
lights out.
Boom. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So, yeah, what are you doing on the weekends to like set yourself up to be ready to go on a Monday? So again, the overarching thing is like the process. And again, the one thing I challenge them is that when they come back, like after summer break, like everybody's super juiced, everybody's ready to go and all that stuff. So then it's like, all right, cool. I love this. But what's this going to look like knowing that our off-season program is about like 16, 7 weeks? Like, are you going to have this same energy in week 6, week 7? You know, obviously right now we're getting into fall ball. So now the workload goes up. Like, how are you going to start feeling now? Because we just came off of, yeah, you maybe go to the field, take some ground balls, take some swings, then you're somewhat still pretty fresh to like come in the weight room and train. Now it's like you're going out to the field, you're scrimmaging, you might be doing some simulated games, all that stuff. Now you're coming in the weight room, like, do you have the same energy? So I think the overarching thing is like trust the process and almost to take it another level, try to enjoy the process because at the end of the day, like if you're so results driven, there's going to be times, especially in the sport of baseball, it's going to let you down. Because I always say baseball's a game of failure. Whenever I have recruits come on campus and talking to their parents, it's like, all right, cool. You go 3 for 10 on a weekend, like you're hyped. You do
Yeah.
that in the big leagues, you're a Hall of Famer. You get 3 questions right out of 10 on a test, your parents are yelling at you. That's a crazy like concept to think about. So it's like you're playing a game of failure. So the thing with it is the other message that I preach is that you have to embrace failure. Like in the weight room, I tell them like you're gonna fail in here. There's gonna be a weight that you put on the bar that you're not able to hit all the reps or you're not able to hit the speeds that the goals are.
Hmm.
How do you react to that? Are you okay with like, all right, I didn't get it this week, but maybe my goal next week is like, I'm gonna hit this. Those are the ones that when I see that kind of reaction, those are the ones that usually end up being successful, especially if they do that week after week after week after week. Because then you kind of see where they started, and we collect data both from like weights, reps, force plate
Yeah.
numbers, and all that. So you can see where a guy started and see where they ended in the course of a year, and you're like, yeah, the mentality that that kid had when it came to embracing failure, I knew he was going to get to this point. Then you got ones that are like, all right, they fail and they're like, man, screw this. Like, I don't need to be doing this anyway. Like, I'm here to play baseball, blah, blah. Those are the ones that's like, all right, if you have that mindset, then you're probably not going to progress or you're pretty much going to stay pretty stagnant as you go on. So, yeah, all that to say to go back of like trusting the process, but then also, like I said, enjoying the process because it's not all glitz and glamour all the time. It's hard. And again, if it were easy, everybody would be doing it and everybody would be super elite, but it's not. So it's the ones that embrace like the failure, the struggles, when they're not feeling good, they still push through. Those are the ones that I feel like are going to be the most like more successful when it comes in the end.
Dude, that's that end piece of if it was I mean, because everything you said was great, but but
Yeah.
when you said when it if it was easy, like if you were doing something, everyone would be doing it. Everyone would
Yeah.
be going for the greatness for the
You're right.
season, and that's kind of a whole little motto to think about too.
Yeah.
Because as you were saying that stuff, it made me wonder, maybe a two-parter here.
Yeah.
What exactly? Because it sounds like just by like, oh, because I know they're there at the academy and they're really working on their game, but obviously they're doing other things besides baseball, in instance of what we're talking about,
Yeah.
or whatever sport they're training. So I was curious how, just a rough estimate of how much of their day is actually like the sport and training and studying and
Yeah.
film and everything. Because
Yeah.
then that might tie us to the second part where you've talked about, you just said business a couple times, like take care of your business and stuff. I wondered
Yeah.
if those go together. I have a
Yeah.
feeling they
So
can, so that's why I asked it.
yeah, it's actually crazy. So to answer your first question, half of their day goes towards the training. So I guess it's kind of cool in the sense of like where IMG, the way that we have it set up, it's literally almost like a college setup.
Yeah,
Like,
that's what
so
it
for
sounds like.
baseball, yeah. So with my varsity guys, and it switches up based on the levels, but our varsity guys, like, they just do school in the morning. So that might be from like 8 to 12. And then after that, it's straight baseball, like from 1 to about like 6.
And
So, like,
and I just want to interrupt super fast because
yeah,
I could see people thinking like, oh, dude, they're not learning anything. They're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But I just want to put this in perspective. I think if you cut school down and like, all right, you're only gonna do 4 hours, but actual 4 hours,
Yeah,
and then you're
yeah,
going to go do all this other stuff where you're going to be learning skills and
yeah,
everything else
yeah.
that can apply to it. I think that is a perfectly executed day.
No doubt. And I guess I look at it as like, I was telling my guys the other day when it comes to speed development that when you come to speed development, it's more about quality over quantity.
Yeah.
So like usually during a speed session, like we'll take a good amount of the session just to prep for us to do 3 to 5 really good reps to really, because at the end of the day, like in order to get fast, you got to sprint fast, right? So
Mhm.
that's a whole different rabbit hole that I could go into. But going to what you were talking about in school, like it's like, all right, cool, you got 4 hours to like get some quality work. And again, I hope nobody downplays our schooling here at IMG
No, yeah,
because
yeah.
like elite of the elite, like especially with a boarding school, like the teachers over here are awesome and all that. So, having the quality in the beginning and then in a sense almost like incentivizing because we also have it to where it's like if you're not handling your stuff in the classroom, you're not able to do sport. So it's almost like if you don't take the time during that first half of the day to make sure you're doing what you need to, then you don't get the other half of the day, which I
Hmm.
absolutely love, right? So yeah, it's very much like I said, half their day they have school in the morning, and then from there, like some of those guys, like they have time to grab lunch, change into their stuff, and then they have a lift with me at 1:30. They have a lift from 1:30 to 2:30. Once they're done with that, they're out at the field. They're out at the field. They'll practice, and then sometimes after that, they'll have like a workshop because the other aspects that we have is like nutrition, leadership, mental performance. What else? We have sports medicine, obviously. Um, yeah, and then obviously they have skill. We have the ability to have like video analysis of like what their practices were, so they could take an at bat and kind of break down the stuff and all that. So it's like we have a lot of that stuff that kind of culminates like a college setup from a school standpoint, but then also a professional setting with all the tech and resources that we have here.
Yeah, it's that's exactly what I was thinking it was. It's a good setup with just all the data because that just brings it back to even more of the data to track
Yeah,
everything because then you can really see. So what is the business when you're saying like handle your business and stuff? How does
yeah,
that tie in?
yeah.
What does that mean when you're talking to your
Yeah,
kids?
so when it comes to the business, like I almost look at it like I said, we do have some of the elite of elite, right? So one of the things that I try to tell them is that there is that business side of it. So I think of one guy that we had last year that ended up going between the first and second round in a compensation pick. Like his business started the first day he was here, in the sense of like I almost everybody loves money, right? So I always refer to like money when it comes to that sense. So I took it as like your body is a bank account, right? Every time
Okay.
you practice, train, and all that stuff, you're making a withdrawal. Like what are you doing? What are you doing to make deposits? So one thing I try to teach my guys is like recovery. Like how are you recovering? When you put anything in your body, that is a deposit. How big of a deposit is that? How you sleep, that's just free money right there. It's just, hey, get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Water. The more water you drink, that's more money in your account, right? Because then I always look at it as like what I tell them, especially, some of our guys, a good amount of our guys, like everybody, like if you're trying to make it to the next level, you got to understand these organizations are investing money in you. So what are things that you're doing in a sense to put money in your pocket? Like the way that I use like the experience that I have and I try to pass on the knowledge is like, hey guys, I'm trying to put money in your pocket, right? By giving you this information to best set you up and put you in a good spot and also put yourself in the limelight of some of these organizations to, hey, this guy is worth X amount of money because of how he is as a person, how he goes about his business, and how he trains, how he does like his routines and all that stuff. So yeah, the business side is very much like what I tell them is like, hey, you do what you need to from a routine based standpoint every single day to get better and better. You're only making yourself more money. But if you don't do that and you're lazy, not showing up on time, not getting your work done, whatever, you're losing money. So I always refer to business as like, you are the business. How are you making your business more money on what you're doing every single day? And then how are you losing your business money on what you do every day? So that's kind of the side of it when it comes to that. And then usually when we get those guys that are getting to the point, I always give them again the perspective like of what a strength and conditioning coach or the player development or aspect of a professional organization, like what they're looking for. Because I just came from that. So
Yeah.
again, going through the development, like when it was draft time, it was like everybody in the organization was doing draft evals, and the questions on the questionnaire that like you would think is on there, like I think some of these kids nowadays just think it's just very much like, what's his exit velocity, what's his pitching velocity. It was like, I think there's one organization that sticks out to me that when I had a call with them, it was literally 15 to 20 minutes of how are they as a person, what's their work ethic, what kind of teammate are they, how do they go about their business. When you're interacting with them, are they super respectful or they don't want to listen to what you or whatever? 15 to 20 minutes. And then after that, it was maybe a couple questions of like, all right, well, what's their mentality on the baseball field after that? So I think again, it's like I try to harp on like, cool. Scouts know that you love baseball and you do all that, but I think the one thing that kind of takes people that extra level or gets them that extra money is
Hmm.
like their character, how they respect, how they treat their coaches, how they treat people, how they go about their business. I say it all the time, but like how they do all that. And then that's where it's crazy because these major league organizations drafting you for your baseball ability. That's when they care about the baseball aspect. Because again, they're investing so much money into these kids that they want to make sure they don't grab somebody that would hurt their ROI, return on investment.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. I've never heard of it, like the business thing and all those deposit things,
No
Brian. I
doubt.
mean, okay, so I gotta tell you a quick story, and then
Yeah, go
that
ahead.
was that is perfect. So I'm gonna have to use that. Just to be
Yeah,
honest, I'm gonna have to
no,
take it for a spin with some people I talked to. But I was just talking to a where I'm from in Iowa, a pretty big baseball name. Just we met somehow, got in the same area and met up. But he was talking to me about some good prospects that were around here and how skill wise, right, the velocity and everything, they were like good. Like everyone know them for that. But it
right.
was all those other questions that you were kind of talking about that you said the teams look at. And
Yeah,
this guy was like, he didn't have it. He didn't have it. I mean, heck, when I was there, I didn't have some of this stuff, and
yeah,
that's why they didn't make it. That's why they're not there at the pros. And I was like, wow, that's
yeah.
crazy just
Yeah,
to hear
and
it.
I've seen that kind of over and over in the different spots that we have. Obviously, not in professional baseball because we're obviously picking at those guys, but
Yeah.
there's been times where it's like some of these kids, like I said, have all the skill set, and some of these organizations pass on them because they don't pass the person. Like they're very much in tune with the person before the player. Because again, it's one of those where it's like you can have all the skill in the world, but like when you get into our organization, say you're a high school kid, like I always tell our guys, like if you're a high school kid, more than likely you're starting at rookie ball. So then you got to go rookie ball, single A or low A, high A, double A, triple A, then to the big leagues. So again, a lot of these organizations are looking at, all right, cool, we're drafting you at where you're at right now, but are you the type of person that would take ownership in your career to continue your development as you progress through the different levels and do what's needed in order to get ultimately to the major leagues? So again, if they feel like you can't do that, then they just feel like you're just going to stay stagnant, so they're like, all right, I'd rather pass on you, get somebody that's maybe not as skillful, but has the qualities knowing that even if they go through adversity, they're going to bounce back and then keep going. So maybe they get to low A, have a good year, high A, struggle that year, bounce back the next year, have a good year, double A, struggle, bounce back, have another good year after that, get the triple A right on the cusp of it. They know that's like right on the tip, struggle, but then still are working to bounce back, then they make it to the major leagues. That's where I think some of these, like the mentality piece that people don't understand that like some of these organizations expect you to fail. They want to see how you react to that failure because each level has its nuances of like each level pitchers are throwing harder, strikes are thrown out more often, guys are hitting their spots and all that stuff. So you're gonna struggle. They know you're gonna struggle. But then how you bounce back for them, those are the ones that they're excited about because they know you'll try to bounce back in order to just get closer and closer and closer and hopefully get to the major leagues that one day. But if you're a
Yeah.
guy that's like you don't handle failure well, they just know that like there's potentially that you might give up. They don't want to invest in that.
No, and it was just baseball is such a good representation of that whole
Yeah.
trying to climb that mountain too, of just what you said of bouncing back and everything.
Yeah.
which I didn't really think about too much before this talk.
Yeah.
So I got like two more things for you, then we'll have to bounce. But
Oh, you're good.
I was this money, this deposit thing. You're your business.
Yeah.
The Tell me how the younger athletes, like obviously like in, I would say towards the end of college and especially pro, like they would all fully understand like just take care of yourself, or at least
Yeah.
to most of the extent. But
Yeah.
for younger athletes and stuff, I know they don't always think like do all the recovery stuff or
Yeah.
eat this, eat that.
Yeah.
But when you put it in terms of like you're putting more money into your body, more money into your account, is that,
Yeah.
just from my perspective, it seems like they would grasp that. They would like to hear that more.
Yeah.
Like I'm my own money. Let's get this
Yeah.
going.
Yeah. 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 So I've always been, and again, so that's kind of how I emulate as a coach. I've always been a visual person. Like if you make something, like you got to show me things. I'll be honest. Like I'm probably maybe one of the only strength coaches that's not really big on reading. Like I don't like it. Like I'm very much like, I like the social media like standpoint. Like again, try to weed out some of the
Yeah,
BS and all that stuff. But yeah, I'm very visual. So obviously something that I try to when building relationships, because that's a foundation, it's like what do you really care about? And I feel like that's across the board that everybody wants more money or want to make more money. Like I just think that's like that's a
that's
staple, right?
yeah, it's a
So
staple.
I use that. So to your point of like working with college and professional, they have like somewhat already of a foundation of that before I even get to them. When it comes to high school, like you gotta understand, like some of these kids just don't know. They don't know. Like, so I think a big emphasis that I'm making this year that I felt like I kind of dropped the ball on last year was just like education. Like, hey, listen, like if you're making a routine, this is what it looks like. And I'll put together slideshows and I'll show it to my guys of like, all right, like, hey, if you're getting ready for a session, like you're gonna do this exercise, this exercise, this exercise. These are the reasons why you're doing it, and hopefully you'll see the results. So again, trying to do that and then allow them to perform, like whether it's like force plate jumps, perform the force plate jumps, and then show them on the back end of what the results are. To where it's like last year you didn't do this prep stuff before you jumped. These were your numbers. Now you're doing this prep stuff before your jumps, and these are your numbers. And it makes it super instantaneously that it's like, oh, I need to do this, right? So with the high school athlete, even some of our elite ones, like they just don't know how to be a pro. So that's where an education piece is the biggest thing for them. And what I try to do instead of just give them like the actual terms of things and all that,
Yeah,
I'll I wouldn't even say dumb it down. That's like no disrespect to anybody. It's more so, how could I make something so complex, so simple and easy to digest? That's what I usually try to have a goal with education. And again, if I can have them understand one, two, maybe three things a week, and we just kind of layer it on as the year goes on, then it's kind of fun to see all the stuff that we taught them from the beginning of the fall and then towards the end of the fall, see where they're at. And then obviously in the most important part of their year, where it's spring, where they play in their season, how they try to piece it together and kind of stand back and kind of see, "Oh, well, I taught you guys these things. Let me see how you apply it." That's where it's rewarding for me, because it's like now you start seeing guys. I know the other day I kind of talked about like prep, like how you prep for a lower body lift, how you prep for an upper body lift, how do you prep for jump testing. And I'll be in the office. We kind of have like a Overwatch type deal, like in our
yeah,
weight room. So it's like we have our offices and we could see like the floor, we could see the second floor and all that stuff. And after I taught them, one of the things that I told them was like, hey, like just to get your body warm, like hop on the bike for 5, 10 minutes. It was like the next week, I started to see like 10, 15 guys on the bikes, like getting on there, riding around. We had jump testing, so I gave them some plyos that they're doing. They're doing the plyos and all that stuff, so that when they came up to the force plates, they were ready to go. That's the most rewarding thing for me. And again, it's like once I see a good amount of them grasp it, then I kind of add that another layer. I'm the one thing I'm trying to be careful of is not throw too much at them that
yeah,
they're not able to digest it and actually apply it, and then kind of go from there. So there's been weeks where it's like, all right, I'm just gonna reiterate what we talked about last week, and then we'll reevaluate next week to see what we introduce to that. So yeah, with the high school athletes, it's very much like teaching them how to go about this stuff and the reasons why behind it. When it came to collegiate professional, they already had that foundation. You're just trying to fine tune it to take them from that like 98% to like 99%. You know what I mean?
And that's exactly what I was wondering. And I loved how the layering things and throwing stuff on them is perfect because
Yeah.
you can even see, and then to just make it more digestible, just tying the pieces back that we said, you just throw them the data. You just say,
Yeah.
well, last year you did it, you got this number, and this year you can see that evolution. It's pretty cool,
Right. For sure.
and that's what you like to hear.
No doubt.
So last thing I usually ask people with Coach Walker is like one key, like if you had like one key takeaway or one final message, like what would that be for you? And I'll just caveat, and if you need to think about it too, you can. But I'll say I really like this because we did not, sometimes with strength coaches, sometimes we go into the weeds because I mean I know that stuff a little bit too. Not
Yeah.
as much, but I mean I that is a part-time job too.
Yeah.
And but we stayed more on the mentality side, and that's what I loved. But if we talk, I could talk to you about more strength and conditioning stuff just another time
No
for
doubt.
sure. But
No
I mean,
doubt.
we can geek out on that. But if you have
Yeah.
one kind of takeaway message or like one hit home before we wrap it up, I'm always curious to hear it
Be
because
good to
we
people.
be
Be
good
good to
to people.
people.
All right.
Yeah.
I was gonna
Like
say,
just be a good person. Like I had to think about that because it's like, yeah, like you were saying, I love the strength and conditioning thing and all that, but at the end of the day, like I deal with people. Like some of the stories is like not even to get deep, like some of the reasons, like if you really get to know like the athlete, some of the reasons that are motivating them for what they're doing. And again, I said money before, but like some of these stories, like, I mean, I've had some guys that have made it to the next level and pretty much their motivation was they wanted to make a lot of money to help out their family that's been in struggle for years. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Whether it was like, hey, like as soon as I get this money, the first thing is that I'm paying off my mom's house so that she doesn't have to do that, and also like making sure that she's taken care of so she doesn't have to work. Like that's their motivation. So like I don't put that in people's faces of like, hey, that's your competition. It's more of like that helped me, that helped me or reminds me every single day of why I do the things that I do. Like obviously it's like I want IMG to be the best baseball player development facility in the country. And I mean that against all Division I schools, all professional organizations. Like that's the ultimate goal. That's my
yeah,
like shoot high like goal,
yeah.
right? But
Get it?
then it's like some of these kids that when you talk to them, it's like I just want a good amount of them. I want them to be in a way better situation that they've been in. Because I think everybody kind of gets this thing where it's like everybody at IMG is rich. Like no, like some of these kids are good and they have opportunities to come here, and all that. And like, if you really talk to them, like they have the motivator where it's like they are willing to sacrifice being close to their family or being with their family to be across the country here at IMG to put themselves in the best opportunity possible to hopefully make a lot of money to then give back to their family and take care of them and also play the sport that they love. So I kind of go back is like treat people well. Like it's always like I always like this quote that I saw is like work hard, be good to people. So you just never know people's stories, man. Like I said, the experience thing, you never know like some of the experience that some of these people have like that I've come across as like, wow, they've really made it out of really tough situations to be that where they're at. And they're just like the fact that they bring the energy that they do every single day, knowing what they came from, it's inspirational. So yeah, I would probably say the last message just be good to people and be a good person.
Yeah, you kind of gave me goosebumps there just because I could
Yeah,
know some of those stories too, and just where
yeah,
they come from, and it's kind of like another one of those investments, and how
yeah,
they're
no, no
hoping it
doubt,
pays off in the future.
no doubt.
How could people find you if they really liked what you were talking about or anything of the sorts? If there was
Yeah,
a
well, I
special,
keep it I keep it pretty simple. Like, I want to say all my social medias is bwalker428. So that's my Instagram, that's my X, that's my Instagram, that's LinkedIn. That's pretty much just pretty straightforward. I'd probably say if you ask my wife, I'm a really bad texter, so I probably won't give out my number in that standpoint. But yeah,
no, don't, yeah,
I usually tell people I'm like, hey, like. shoot me a DM. I'll try to get back to it as much as I can. Like, obviously, I put out a lot of content on Instagram and X. So, obviously, if you want to kind of get a glimpse into what we do at IMG Academy baseball, I put out some stuff and I try to hold myself accountable to do that weekly. But yeah, man, just reach out. I'm very open to, you know, helping anybody out that ask any questions because I was there not too long ago and people have been super influential for me. So it's the least I can do in my career at this point for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm just gonna wrap it up here, but that's exactly what you told me too. You just said I just want to help you out however I can and
Yeah, no
answer any
doubt.
questions.
No
But
doubt.
cool. So the Athletes Health Podcast here, just talking to athletes, coaches, leaders, anyone we can learn some tricks from. Brian, you dropped a lot of good ones on you today. That's exactly why I like to do this. It's awesome. It's just some free tidbits to go along with my coaching and everything else to help out the teams and athletes and anyone along the way. But thanks, man. I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you having me, big guy.